John Nolte's article, 16 Reasons Why I Believe Joe Biden Sexually Assaulted Tara Reade. I'm going to read through some of the 16. I won't get to all of them, which is why you got to go to Breitbart.com. But the story gets increasingly credible, and it's become crystal clear that even some of us in the conservative media miss some of the details of the early stages of this saga. And that's why it's going to get big, and Biden is not going to be able to stay in his basement making creepy facial gestures at his wife. He's going to have to come up and discuss this in a broad way if he wants to be president of the United States in the post-Me Too era. Let's read from the piece. Primarily because I incorrectly believed her story had changed over the course of a year, had moved from unwanted touching to a flat-out sexual assault, I at first had trouble believing Tara Reade's claim she was sexually assaulted by presumptive Democrat nominee Joe Biden in 1993. So this is big. He's already hit at the main thing. A lot of us, myself included, thought there were some incongruities in the way that she had told her story originally. That's not so. So if you piece it back together, and Nolte does very carefully, you'll see that it wasn't that her story changed, is that she included newer details as she did subsequent interviews. This is a massive difference, and this is why the story is finally popping over the last couple of days. Nolte continues, when Reade originally came forward in April of 2019, she joined about a half dozen women who have credibly accused Biden of unwanted touching. And I say credibly because Biden has serially committed acts of unwanted public touching. We have countless videos of Biden making women and children uncomfortable and inappropriate hair sniffing, nuzzling, kissing, and getting handsy. Yes, this is true, and not to mention other allegations of sexual assault, many of which we've documented at Breitbart. Perhaps the most famous one is a report that he would force women's Secret Service agents to watch him skinny dip. That's repulsive and revolting, and I apologize to any of you eating. Going on. Now, however, Reade tells a much more lurid and disturbing story of being sexually assaulted by Biden. While working for the then Delaware senator while in her mid-20s, she says he cornered her in a hallway, thrust his hands up her skirt, and I'm actually going to skip some of the details here in case anyone's watching with some of their children, because we would love for this to be a family thing as best we can. But the details are not light touching or an unwanted pass. The details are a violent sexual assault. So Nolte goes on to list, here are the 16 reasons, and let's go through them. First of all, Reade did not change her story. This is big. This is a mistake so many people made at the start. They thought the story had changed. I believe I even mentioned once, I thought the story had changed. That's false. That was a mistake. Now we know that she actually had, her story had not evolved, but more details had come to light. She had filed a complaint against Biden over the unwanted touching. That's an amazing thing that had happened. And that was something that I don't think people were aware of. Number two, experts say assault victims frequently don't tell the full story all at once. This is crucial. So Rich McHugh, who's one of the investigators who broke a lot of this story, he'd worked with Ronan Farrow in Ronan Farrow's research, a guy who is got the most Me Too people to be held accountable over time and broke much of the Harvey Weinstein saga. He says he found Reade's allegations credible and added, a number of Weinstein's victims didn't come out with their full story to us at the time. For obvious reasons, they were wrestling with whether they trust you as a reporter, whether they want to go out with the full horrific story that's going to be Googleable for the rest of their lives. Such a crucial point, such a great point. And you can apply it to your personal lives. How many times have you only told a partial story to someone for whatever, the sake of time, the sake of trust, whatever it is? And that's what he thinks could be happening here with Tara Reade. Next, Reade's a lifelong Democrat. She did support Bernie Sanders, so that's important to note. But why would you risk more Donald Trump if you're a Democrat in order to punish Joe Biden? So the timing of it doesn't look like, why would a Democrat right now do this to make the entire Democratic establishment vulnerable? There's a possibility. It's just pure vindictiveness from a Bernie supporter, but unlikely. Next, Reade worked in Biden's Senate office in 1993. It might sound simplistic, Nolte writes, but it's important to remember how the Democrats and the media went over Christine Blasey Ford's now debunked allegations against Brett Kavanaugh when she could not have even established that they even met. How crucial is that? So he did work for her. Remember, we went through the entire Kavanaugh hoax news cycle, and they hadn't even met necessarily. Isn't that unbelievable? much less could they be placed together in the same room at the same time in the year that the accuser suggested. Tara Reade worked for the man. Next, there were 4 witnesses. Nolte goes through all of them. I won't do that here for the sake of time, but all of these witnesses are corroborating her story. We've got 4 credible witnesses. All of them are broken down in this article. And this is the other thing. Reade, who's putting herself out there, is actually inviting the scrutiny. Nolte writes, unlike Christine Blasey Ford, who hid behind her lawyers and her little girl voice, Reade's inviting scrutiny. She's asked investigative reporters like McHugh to dig into the details of her allegation. Liars never invite scrutiny. They dodge it and look for excuses to avoid it. And that reminds me of what Joe Biden's doing right now, who's not addressing this head on. He's not coming out and offering himself up to take this on as an opportunity to show who he really is. Remember, he says, that's not who we are. Whenever he talks about Donald Trump, you've heard that every dumb speech he gives. He always said, that's not who we are. Well, apparently he's the type of guy that has a staffer accuse him of a violent sexual assault, and he just wants to sweep it under the rug and assume that his media allies will just defend him or not cover it at all. The list goes on and on, but the key one maybe is number 10, where the mom's anguish call to Larry King Live. This was a big moment just about a week or so ago where Reade had been telling interviewers that she told her mother, Jeanette Altemus, at the time about the alleged assault. Unfortunately, Altemus passed away in 2016, so we can't verify for sure, but Reade's been telling journalists that sometime in 1993, her mother called into CNN's Larry King Live asking for advice about her daughter's problem with a prominent senator. The video clip has been found, and it's crucial and a damning piece of evidence in support of Reade's allegations. Unbelievable stuff. Good reporting by our pals at Newsbusters for that one. And this is something that is now too big to ignore. So the Biden campaign made their first move. What was their first move? It was to send out talking points to only allies. No one in conservative media, no one even in neutral media. This is mostly things for surrogates to say. And the crux of the argument, which was the lead story at Breitbart News just a couple of nights ago, a BuzzFeed report. BuzzFeed got it leaked. I'm guessing a Democrat leaked it to BuzzFeed. And they had this report that Joe Biden was saying the argument is that the New York Times cleared us. Well, the New York Times came out a day later and said, no, you're not cleared. We didn't weigh in one way or the other. We just reported certain details. And the New York Times story actually scrubbed mentions of Joe Biden's unwanted touching. So the New York Times is hardly credible on this issue anyway. Remember that piece a couple of weeks ago where the New York Times was slobbering over Hunter Biden's crappy artwork and how he's finding peace in his artwork, even though he's a deadbeat dad with a estranged family and a love child to a stripper that was created when he was cheating on his brother's widow? That's correct. All that happened. And the New York Times wrote a puff piece about his artwork. So I don't think the New York Times is credible on this one. Not even a little bit. And yet Biden cites them, and they, of course, are not playing along. Biden cites them as the evidence that he's cleared. And you know who goes out and repeats this? Biden surrogate after Biden surrogate after Biden surrogate. Stacey Abrams and others. Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Kristen Gillibrand. All of these Democrats going out and repeating these talking points. Almost verbatim. Joe Biden sent out these women to lie. He sent out these women to lie on his behalf about a sexual assault. Even if the assault didn't happen, and it probably did, or at least it looks like something certainly happened. But even if it didn't happen, look at this. He's having them give this talking point that the New York Times cleared him when the New York Times denied it. These are women who are being put out there. John Nolte made this point first, and he's going to have a big article on it at Breitbart News. So look for that in the coming days at Breitbart.com, where he breaks this down. This is way over the top by Joe Biden, and now the media has to cover it. Me Too is in a total bind now. Alyssa Milano says she still admires Biden, but Rose McGowan, on the other hand, has called the Democrats a cult, and she's calling them out. So what happens to the vaunted movement that's supposed to be defending all women, believing all women? What do they do with Tara Reade's story? They have a choice to make. They can either live up to their own values and believe all women, and that means Joe Biden must not be the Democrat nominee, or they could sweep it under the rug and lose all their credibility forever, what little was left of it. Very interesting development there that the Me Too crowd has got to grapple with. The Washington Post had an editorial today. that said Joe Biden should release records and address the Tara Reade scandal. Mitch McConnell's called and said Biden's going to have to address this scandal. This is bubbling up at a major level. Right before we went on the air today, Nancy Pelosi, Biden surrogate, just recently came out to endorse Biden, said that she snapped at a reporter saying that she didn't need a lecture. And Joe Biden is Joe Biden, which is currently trending on Twitter right now. Amazing stuff. And this is all being dealt with right now while Biden sits like a coward in his basement.